everyone, Jamie here from the NOAC Godcast, where we offer wacky wisdom weekly from God's Word. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Moses, and even though he couldn't see it, God was with him. So this month, we're focusing on God with us. And the funny thing is that we're able to look at these Bible stories and say, of course God was with them when you get to see, the whole thing from start to finish. But what we fail to realize is that we get to see the overview, not the human's point of view. And so we get to see it from start to finish, while the people in the stories are actually living it and trying to figure it out day by day. And today I want to talk about Moses. Now, there's so much that Moses went through in his life. There's a lot of things. But God was right there, even when Moses couldn't see it. First off, God protected Moses from death right off the bat. In boat.
Not right off the bat, right off the boat.
Oh, right off the boat. That would make more sense.
Right off the bulrush.
I wrote this at 10 p.m. My brain is
you
not.
You can stick with bat.
Okay. Exodus 1:8-10 says, "Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply and come to pass, that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land." So, some context, the Israelites were enslaved to Egypt at this time. So the new Pharaoh was afraid that there would be too many Israelites that there were too many Israelites being born, and that the Israelites would soon be able to overtake Egypt, either on their own, or they would be able to join their enemies and take them over. And that did not make Pharaoh very, very happy. And so they started thinking of ways that they could prevent this from happening. And in verse 22, it says, "And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive." So they decided that all the Hebrew babies that were male had to be thrown into the river, but the females, they were fine. They could be left alone. So unfortunately, Moses is, he had the odds against him, like right off the bat, and he was barely even born. So I'm going to say this wrong, because I always say it wrong. Is it Jochebed? Moses' mom.
I don't know. I've ever said it out loud.
I've heard
Jochebed sounds very French.
Like
I don't think she was.
I believe it's Jochebed.
It's probably Achbed.
It's either Jochebed or Joshbed.
I like Achbed.
I think Achbed.
It's not Ahmed.
No, so the J is silent, and it's Hebrew. Achbed.
I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say Jochebed.
Okay.
She knew that she was supposed to kill her son, but she couldn't. Instead, she would keep him hidden for 3 months, and then she would create a little ark bassinet to place him in. Once she placed him in the river, she left him by the reeds in hopes that somebody would find him and take care of him. You saying something?
So it's interesting, like the series this month is God with Us.
Yes.
Which is true. But it's an interesting, I don't know where you're going. It's interesting to think that God was with, Jochebed, had to trust that God was with Moses.
Yeah.
So not only is God with us, but having enough faith to realize that God is with our kids when we can't be, that's a very real thing.
Yeah.
Juliet goes to school. She goes to a Christian school. There's not a super lot of potential harm there, and I'm there most of the days. But every single day before we get out of the car, we have prayer together, and one of the things I pray with her is that the Lord would protect her mentally, physically, and spiritually, because all three of those are important.
Yeah.
And but ultimately, when she leaves my hands, once I walk her in, ultimately she's in God's hands. And so for me to recognize that God is with her just as much as he's with me, and that God is responsible. God can be trusted with my kid, just like Jochebed had to trust, not to trust God with Moses.
We went from last week was Australia, this week is French.
This is the International Christmas special on the NOYC Godcast.
The funny thing is, since I was reading this, and I know, I've read the story 1,000 times, but reading it, I told Jacob was sitting there, I'm like, she kind of listened. She put him in the river. Like, she just didn't kill him.
May that be a lesson in leadership to Pharaoh to be specific.
Yeah, be very specific.
So we've been like, we just studied this in LifeWise like 2 weeks. You know, like we're still.
Juliet just sang this in
Going
Sunday
through
school
it.
like a few weeks ago.
Yeah. We were at the, we were.
Yeah.
We were at the burning bush last.
So Jochebed, Hochbed. Okay, so Josh's bed. I don't know.
We should look up the thing.
Hey
and play the
Siri,
thing.
who was Moses' mommy?
That would be a good answer.
Yeah.
But so this is 400 years later. Okay, and clearly the Israelites, the Hebrew people, were living under the Egyptian government rule of things, okay? And like the question came up in LifeWise, like how removed were they from God? You know what I mean? Because 400 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you take every church and every Bible off the planet, how long would humanity last before humanity would forget about God?
Yep.
Okay? So here, like where Josh said like she had to have like some sort of faith, okay, I would even question like she may have just been like, I gotta save my kid, I'm gonna put him in the basket and good luck. I hope the crocodiles aren't hungry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But of course, all along, God is like, you know, like I don't want to say manipulating, but he is directing the events as they happen, and I don't want to be a spoiler alert, but even as you get more into it, you know what I mean? How you know they need the maiden to take care of Moses, and you know what I mean? Like that's not random circumstance,
Right.
You know what I mean? This is all God's divine
it's
plan.
provision.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to be going into. But like basically,
That's why I said it in the spoiler alert.
oh, you're fine.
Okay.
But basically, Pharaoh's daughter happened to be bathing at the time, going to clean up. And what's the odds that Pharaoh's daughter's the one that came down there?
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? And obviously that is God. God was with Moses. It's like, it's the theme this month or something. But, so she came down and she saw this bassinet and she, told her maiden or her maids to come over and, grab it for her. And she opened it up and that's when Moses started crying. And so she was like, we need to take care of this. Well, I don't know why I always see it as like the sneaky sister because Miriam was watching the whole time.
Well, if you know what happens later in her life,
Yes,
she is kind of the sneaky
she's
sister.
kind of sneaky. But like I always think of it as like the little kid
Yeah.
sneaking to see what happens.
Right.
And so like she was watching the whole time to see what would happen to her brother. And so as soon as she saw that Pharaoh's daughter guy, she's like, "Do you want me to go to one of the Hebrew women?" Because they knew it was a Hebrew baby. And they're like, "Do you want me to go to one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" And she went and got her mom.
Right, yeah.
Like,
She didn't know any other Hebrew ladies.
she's like, I gotta go get my mom. And so not only was he saved from death because he was put in the basket, and then went on to Pharaoh's daughter, which, I mean, we don't know like what would have happened, but like if somebody else would have found him, he probably would have still died.
Yeah,
Because Hebrew children or males were told to be killed.
Yeah.
And so if it wouldn't have been Pharaoh's daughter herself, it may have not. It would have been like, oh, turn that basket over.
Yeah, like
Throw that baby back in there. And so, I lost my spot. Where was I talking?
Where were you talking?
Yeah, where were?
Right here.
Well, fair enough. But anyway, so basically, she like got her, and then Miriam was like, "I'll go get my mom." So not only was he able to stay alive, but he was also able to stay with his mother
Exactly.
Yeah.
inside of the nursing years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not only does God keep us safe, but God spoils us. Like, you
Yeah.
can't read the Bible without seeing this. You're like, wow.
Because it could have been easily some other woman.
And
Right.
like the beautiful thing is that's all grace. Like it is
Yeah.
provision, but it's also grace because
Yeah.
Moses didn't. Like he's a baby. He cried and done things in his diaper.
Baby
Like that.
things,
Yeah. There was
Yeah.
nothing Moses
Something's
could
in his
have.
diaper.
There is nothing Moses could have done to have deserved that goodness
No.
from God. It was pure grace
Yeah.
and provision. But so it is with our life, without the dirty diaper, maybe.
I mean, we
for
do.
some of you. But that's the same for our lives. Like there's nothing we could do to deserve God's provision. There's nothing we could do to earn His grace, and yet here we are.
Yep. And then once he was old enough, he went back to Pharaoh's daughter to be raised as her own. However, he knew that he was a Hebrew. And one day he was a walking and he saw a Egyptian beating up another Hebrew man, and that made him very angry. And so he looked both ways, looking around, making sure there's nobody
Sneaky
there.
like his sister.
Yeah, like his sister. It must be his sister.
It's that Jacques Bed hereditary thing.
Jacques Bed hereditary syndrome. Is that what you said?
Someone called John Hopkins. Oh no.
But either way, he looked both ways to make sure there was nobody there, and then he killed the Egyptian, and then proceeded to bury him in the sand. Like, I feel like you could have at least...
That's a medical term we like to call dead.
Yeah, like, I guess my thing is, like, you could have done better than just... Like, sand moves.
Yeah, like when I read this, I'm like, he dug a hole in sand.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, if you've been to Egypt, there's not a lot of other options.
Put him in a tree.
how do you think like
Back in the river, where this thing started. I don't know.
exactly? You just gotta keep rolling him, man. It's not
Play-Doh.
I don't know, just digging a hole in sand just seems.
It's good.
God is provisional,
Yes,
not
yes.
Moses.
Not Moses. Moses was not very good at that. Anyway, so he went and killed this man, and then he buried him in the sand, and then Pharaoh found out, and Pharaoh was very, very angry, and so Moses ran away from Egypt, and he stayed away for many years, and honestly, through that, God was able to protect him, because, I mean, I don't know how easy it was to run away from, like, an entire, like, Pharaoh army and stuff like that at that time.
World ruler, literally.
Yeah.
And so to run away and be safe somewhere, even if it was miles away, I would assume that they could still travel there.
Yeah.
But God kept him safe through that time.
There was no extradition laws or anything. Like
Safe, and also he protected Moses, but he also prepared Moses.
Yeah.
Like that was
Yes.
his proving ground. That's where Moses became Moses.
Not only would you run away this time, you'd run away again.
Yeah.
But eventually the Pharaoh that wanted to kill Moses would die.
What if
Probably
they
buried in
him
the sand. But like, think about the implications of, I would now just thought about that, like, in all terms, it was his grandfather.
Yeah.
Do you know, like,
Adopted, yeah.
Adopted grandfather. So, like, think about, like, your own grandfather wanting to kill you. That's messed up. But anyway, moving on. I just wanted to lay that in there. That would cheer everybody up. Great Christmas cheer.
Death and hatred.
Sand. Your grandfather doesn't love you.
death in the sands.
But anyway, eventually that Pharaoh would...
Did you say Gramps in the sand?
I'm gonna roll with that. That's not what I said. I'm rolling with that.
You should have.
Is that the new band name?
Gramps in the sands.
Then the Israelites would cry out to God to free them from slavery, and God heard their cries. Then in Exodus 3:2-8, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him into a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not nigh hither, but put thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and of the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmakers, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of the land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. And then here's like the part. In verse 10, God says, Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And so he not only, brought him through, what would have been death, and then he provided him safety and gave him grace even with his mother and all that stuff, and then he provided safety for him to run away to be able to do what God had called him to do later on in life. He is now telling him, you're going to do this. He's going to be with him, and you're going to let my people go. You're going to be part of the way to get them out of there.
I was thinking back to what Kevin said. 400 years between when they served God and when they forsook God. I'm of the mindset that they so had left serving God that when, in a few verses, when God tells Moses, when Moses says, "Who should I tell him send him?"
Yeah.
God had to explain himself, who he was, because they didn't even know who he was anymore.
Yeah.
Let me tell you my name because they don't know who I am.
Yep.
And so that's how far basically Israel no longer knew God, no longer served God. And yet in Egypt, which represents sin, not serving God, God was working to be near to Israel.
Yep.
There's a beautiful poem called The Hound of Heaven and how God pursues us. No matter how far we've strayed or rebelled against him, he pursues us. And that's what we see in this scene is where God was with Israel, though they were totally rebellious and totally sinful and totally straying and wayward from him. Still, he was working behind the scenes to draw them near to himself.
Yep.
With Moses in the bulrush and with Moses in the sand and Moses in the shepherding and all these things, God was working. I am. Never mind. God was working to draw these people to him so that God could be with them, which is our theme this month.
Yeah.
But may that be a reminder for all of us. Like, no matter where you find yourself, God is working to bring you back to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And working to be united with you.
Yeah.
I think that I said this in church a couple of times is that God is pursuing us, okay, and unless you are like actively dodging him at every turn, he's gonna get you.
Yeah. I'm going to get you.
Not in that creepy kind of way, but
God is not a creepy uncle.
no, he's not.
No.
But you have to, like, in my humble opinion, particularly at our church, like, if you go in there with an open mind and you just listen, you know what I mean? Eventually, the Holy Spirit's going to say something to you, okay? The only way that cannot happen is if you go in there and you sit there and you go, I don't believe this. I don't believe this. Yeah, exactly. So, in this instance, like, I wouldn't necessarily like the Israelites were closed-minded. I would say they were more ignorant of who God is.
No one was home.
Exactly. But so they were so far removed, you know what I mean? But there had to be some people who still, you know what I mean?
The heads of the tribes were still there. Like, they were still a religious people. Yeah. They just had totally forgot, they had so intertwined with Egypt and so left the traditions of their people and their heritage and the promises of God that they didn't even know of anymore.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that's why it's really important in today's age. There's this whole thing of living life and, well, God, the Bible doesn't specifically say I can't do this.
That's dangerous.
And so while that's true, that's absolutely true, but there's also generations.
Right.
And so if your generation doesn't hold anything, then the next generation's not going to hold anything, and they're not going to hold anything.
The old saying is that you're producing a more extreme version of yourself.
Yeah.
And your children are the next generation.
Yep.
And that's true.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
It's very terrifying. But like that's
Extreme you and Julia.
Oh, that's terrifying. I think we all know that's true, though.
Oh, goodness. So God tells Moses that I want to bring my people out of slavery and bring them into an amazing promised land. And I'm going to use you to do it. And then Moses goes on into questioning God. Why him? Basically saying that I'm the least desirable for this job. And in verse 12, God says, and he said, certainly I will be with thee. And this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. So he was promising him, I'm going to be there. It's not going to be you that does this. It's going to be me, and I'm just using you to do it.
Right.
And then he was still had some questioning and hesitation, and God eventually allowed him to bring his brother Aaron. And so he, through the whole time, Moses had, I don't know if it's a stutter or it's just a speech impediment. He couldn't talk very well. And so these are the reasons why he was like, I can't do this, but it's not about him. It was about God the whole time. And he just couldn't see that, but it's about him it's about God and not him.
I think that in the verse you had there, I think that really is a beautiful verse, especially for this month and in this thought. God tells Moses, I will be with you, Emmanuel, like God is with us. But then he gives him a promise that follows that. And the promise is that on the mountain you'll serve me. And so my takeaway from that is that because God is with me and hasn't forsook me in all the times I've strayed and let him down and failed him and sinned against him, I will serve him. I will have a relationship with him. And so I can look back and see God working, and that means I can look forward at his promises coming true, but it's all because he's not left me. I've left him plenty of times, but it's because he's not left me that I have a future with him.
Yep.
That is a very good, like when you say how, you can look at the past and see that God is always, with you. It makes it easier to believe his future promises. You know what I mean? And as a Christian, that is so reassuring because once we realize we're in a bad situation, because we all know when we first get in a bad situation, we're not thinking of it.
Yep.
But we can look back and say, last whatever, God got me through it. So God's going to get me through this.
Well, and that's what you see, fast forward.
Yes.
And God literally, for the rest of the Bible, through Revelations, tells them, remember what I did in Egypt?
Yeah.
So, he's making a point here that we always are to look back. I can't remember how many times in the Bible, but the Bible goes out of its way to tell God's people, don't forget to remember.
Yeah.
And so, we get confidence for the future by looking at the past.
There's so many times that they make pillars and different things to remember.
Exactly.
The stones that were stacked up. And it's throughout the Bible, you have different things that are like that, where they we need to put this here so we remember. We have to put, because they're we're dumb. We will forget.
Yes.
We need this. We need a Post-it note.
Yes.
Exactly. Whoever put autosave on computers, they were like, you know what? Just autosave it.
Just autosave it. And so finally, Moses would be setting out to go to Pharaoh and say, "Let the Israelites
you should
go."
sing that part.
No,
You can.
You can sing
He
it.
said it with enthusiasm. He didn't go and say,
But I don't have the booming voice.
Let my people go.
There you go. Very good.
I think Amy, where's she at?
We don't even know what Amy.
Jamie should have ad-libbed that. We could have seen it.
Me
on you.
and then yeah. Well, we didn't.
I didn't know. I don't know what my dude would have been.
Kevin's I'm not letting my voice to that. No.
But finally, after 10 plagues, you would think. So, if you're a pharaoh,
the funny thing is, how many? So we're Christians,
yes.
And one thing goes wrong in a day, and we're like, that's it, I'm done, I'm out.
Yep.
Pharaoh's 10 plagues, and we're not just talking about paper cut. We're talking about
there's blood,
overwhelming
and hail,
catastrophe,
and locusts, and frogs, and
flies. No, he doesn't give up.
Literally takes the death of everyone's firstborn for him to be
and then he's still get him.
He's like, I'll let you go, maybe, and then he lets him go, and then he's like, just kidding.
Which really, what strikes me is this, and like I said, because we've been studying this at LifeWise, is that he's thinking we need to get them out of our land. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's how can we get rid of them? And then Moses is like, hey, let people go. He's like,
that makes sense.
I think that the parallel here is that Egypt is sin.
Yes.
Who is the ruler of sin?
Satan, yeah.
Satan.
And just as much as God is pursuing us, though Pharaoh has no legal right, though Satan has no legal right over our life, he is pursuing us and trying to put a grasp of sin back upon us and will not let go and without a fight.
Yes.
Yet Christ has given that, he's severed that, right? He's severed that pursuit. But that's the same thing we see here.
And just a little tidbit, because I didn't know this until we studied this out in LifeWise, but the 10 plagues that God afflicted upon Egypt directly attacked 10 of the Egyptian gods.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize that until 3 weeks ago.
I hope that wasn't your trivia question.
It's not. No. It's not my trivia question. But I am actually pretty proud of our little ones. Our little ones actually can name at least 9 out of the 10 plagues. Wow. I'm wow. Probably because my mom drilled it into them. Bless you.
So if they ever see a locust and a frog, they're like,
oh no. And they're like,
this is going south.
Where's the Pharaoh? Yes. Where are we at?
10 plagues.
10 plagues. Finally, after the 10 plagues, Pharaoh would let the Israelites go. But after some time had passed, Pharaoh's heart would harden again. And it actually says that God hardens his heart. Yep. But he had his armies go after Moses and the Israelites. And they eventually came to the Red Sea, which they could not cross on foot, and Pharaoh's army was right behind them. And at this time, the Israelites were complaining to Moses. They were like, we would have been better off in Egypt instead of dying out here. But Moses knew that God had told him what to do. And Moses stretched out his hand, because that's what God had told him to do. And the waters parted and they walked on dry ground. And that's not like it wasn't muddy. It wasn't
It was sand.
It was sand.
Like you don't bury dead people in it.
Well, maybe Moses does. But like,
He's walking across, we'll go here.
it wasn't just like it was slightly not wet. They weren't wading in it. They weren't like at their knees in the water. They were.
Right.
It was dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like pick up your kids because they're getting their feet stuck in there.
Is that how you walk?
That's how,
when your feet are that big.
I'm convinced that's how Jacob walks. Have you ever heard him walk? And then as soon as they were across and safe and out of the harm's way, God moved the water right back and swallowed up Pharaoh's army. And we can see that through that, God was with him. Even if people are complaining to you, complaining about things, he was still on track. He's like, I know this is what God wants me to do. This is exactly what I'm supposed to do. And God told me exactly what to do when I got there.
I think that the reason for his confidence is, again, that verse 10 that you read there, because God said, I'm with you. And someone was like, all right. Josephus, I think we've talked about this before on the podcast. Josephus, who was a Christian historian, it wasn't a Christian historian, he was a historian, talks about the scene, and he says that Moses was so convinced that God would deliver him that he may pick up the mountain and move it so they could walk that way.
Yeah.
And so, or he may pick up Israel, just throw him across the water. Moses was so convinced that God, and I think the reason for his confidence, and that should be the same for us, it should give us overwhelming confidence to face anything. Because God has told us he's with us.
Yeah.
Just as much as God told Moses, I will be with you and you will serve me on the mountain, he's told each of us, I am with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'll go all the way with you.
Yeah.
So you will serve me and you will do what I've said. That should be all the confidence we need. Doesn't
we don't
work
even
out
have,
that way.
like, you're not talking about a small thing. Like, he had, like, the faith in God to take an entire group of people, like an entire...
Plus people.
Yeah. Away from somewhere that they were enslaved to for years. And then like we're like, I can't even talk to the person at Walmart.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So-
Like we don't even have the faith to do that.
So I'm picking up what you're laying down. Okay. But do you feel as though Moses had like several advantages that we don't have?
Like him speaking directly
we haven't
to him.
come across a burning bush. You know what I mean? Like we did not.
I would politely disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, please do. Yes.
This is the reason.
Yeah.
Moses was working on hypotheticals. We're working on absolutes. God's word is written and finished. And we have every one of those promises.
Yeah.
Okay.
Signed, sealed, delivered. It's ours. It's done.
And then also you have on top of that, which should be a help, and I feel like we forget. It's like the whole thing we don't have our reminders, is that God wasn't inside of them at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
And we
Well, that's
actually-
what I mean. Like,
yeah.
he spoke through the burning bush. What if Moses never heard from God ever again?
Yeah.
We have the privilege of opening up God's word and hearing
Yeah.
from him daily.
Yeah.
Moses was just hoping he was,
Yeah.
like, what if it was silence for the next 40 years?
Like, and then what are you supposed to do? Well, the bush told me.
Quote of the day. Quote of the day.
Like you're in
Watching
the,
the Pharaoh with the staff goes on the ground like,
I'm sorry that you're dying of
drop
hunger.
that. Let me pick
I'm
that
sorry
up.
about
The
your
bush
shrub
told me.
misunderstanding. That's funny.
Oh, goodness. But yeah, so God was there with Moses even when Moses could not see him or even when Moses could not understand who God was. And just as God was there for Moses, he wants to be there for you and I. Today's considerable quote is somebody that I don't know.
The bush told me.
The bush
Jamie.
The bush told me. When God calls us to step out of our comfort zone, he is not calling us to be comfortable in the situation. He is calling us to be comfortable in him in spite of the situation.
That's good.
And then my featured content is the afters God is with us.
I wonder how many versions of that sentence we could come up
Listen,
with this month.
I think there's like 20
They
songs.
probably are. Because I had 2 or 3 I didn't use for the one I did use. That's funny.
Last week's thing.
Do you have guesses? Who was the word Emmanuel first spoken to?
What were the options?
Joseph, Abraham, Ahab, or Mary?
I'm giving it Abraham.
I'm going to go Mary.
I was thinking Abraham before she said it.
Ahab. In fact, I wrote the whole podcast the first time on that, and then I scrapped it. But I was like, that's still going into the trivia question. Yeah, the first time in the Old Testament is said to Ahab. Huh.
I feel like
It's literally like he's talking about like, we're going to go to war and you're going to be destroyed. And then God's like, oh, and by the way, I'll send someone called Emmanuel. He will be with you. And then it goes back into this war thing. And it's like,
Yep. Snuck there. Right
yeah,
in
it
there.
was
To
fascinating.
let you guys know before I read this, the bolded one is not the correct one. I don't know why it's bolded.
Oh, okay.
You mean the, never mind.
And my about is capitalized twice.
AB out.
AB out.
AB out.
That's her radio sign off.
AV out. So this week's trivia is about how many miles did Mary and Joseph have to travel to get to Bethlehem?
Those are also proper miles.
Yeah.
You're all just staring like,
I'm like,
what?
Did you round
So
those
that's
up?
my problem is I hit the shift for
I do
random
that too,
things. A is 30, B 60, C 90, or D 120.
We just admit, no matter which answer it is,
It's a long.
that's a long ways on not car.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how you got there. It's
Yeah.
it's a long time. All right. So birthdays, hopefully these ones are right as well.
That looks correct because I know at least one of those is correct.
All right. So we have Holly Dingus. We have Adelina Dominguez. Is that how you say it? Tawny Pettit.
Yes.
Okay. Bessie Ring. Desmond Hefner. Or is it Hefner?
Hefner.
Hefner. John Piles. Tiffany McDonald. And Michelle Mosier.
ask
And
how-
Serena Price.
You didn't ask how to pronounce McDonald's because we all know you know how to pronounce
Listen,
McDonald's.
full disclosure. My phone.
The Bush told me to do it.
Before I had my 2014 van, I had a 2018 Escape, and every time I got into it, it would tell me
Do you
that
wanna go to
McDonald's was 10 minutes away. That's what it would tell me every time I got in there.
So the car told you to do it.
Yes.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
Yes. No mail.
Please write us. That would be a great Christmas gift.
Cheers.
God
You
bless
can write.
us,
You can
everyone.
write letters to Santa, but not to us.
Too far. Too much.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let us know what you feel about things. And
Don't forget to tune into the special
Yes.
episode coming up.
we
Recap
changed
episode.
it. Did we change it?
We don't know when it will be, but it will be soon.
When it's here, surprise.
You'll know.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
You would have screamed because I hit that really
Snot.
hard.
Snot. Spoken like a true mom.
Snot. Snot. Who's Bob?
Just never
He's
let
an
it go.
Aussie. Who?
It's really just went downhill quickly.